In this video, I'm going to be uncovering the 4 surfing lessons which took me years to learn and which, as a surfing coach, I see holding surfers back time and time again before they've implemented these. By achieving your understanding with these, we can hopefully get you to expedite your surfing progress, avoid making the silly mistakes that I made early on, and also get you focusing all of your energy into the right areas as you're progressing with your longboarding. And if you are new here, my name is Considine, and I'm a longboard enthusiast, a competitor on the 2023 World Longboard Tour, and a coach. And I'm here to share my learnings and experiences like this one today with you all. So if you do find the video valuable, you find it useful, then feel free to subscribe. And if you know of anyone else who might find it handy as well, feel free to share it with them. And for any ways to support the channel as well as my travels on this year's 2023 World Longboard Tour, feel free to visit the links down below. But let's get into the edit. So the first of the 4 areas that I wanted to cover today is actually planning your wave from the takeoff. So let's dive into exactly what this means and how we can use this to improve your longboarding dramatically. The takeoff and the start of the wave is extremely important for us as surfers for a few reasons. One of the key reasons is it really sets up our wave, and if we position and read the wave correctly from the start, this does a lot to set us up for the entirety of the wave. The beginning of the wave is also often where the wave is at its biggest, and therefore we can really harness a lot of the speed and power of the wave. The wave of course loses its energy as it travels closer to the shore most of the time, so from the perspective of optimizing our wave and making use of this, the takeoff is crucial. Now, all of that you might have heard before, but the real magic comes from learning how to position yourself and read the wave before we've gotten to our feet. One of the key barriers I see in a lot of people surfing, and understandably so, is people paddling, popping up, taking off, and then making the decision of where they want to be for the first maneuver. This unfortunately wastes a lot of space and time, and by correcting this, we can really make some vast improvements in our surfing with this in and of itself. The way I like to break this down is by checking each one of these off as we're paddling into the wave. Firstly, is the wave standing up for a nose ride section? Secondly, is the wave racing down the line? Or thirdly, do we need to fade and get ourselves deeper and more critical into the pocket as we're popping up? By having these questions at the ready, and as we get more comfortable with reading and interpreting the wave, we can then adjust our paddle in and pop up. For the nose ride, one of the most important things I've picked up is we can hang on our stomach and direct ourselves to stay high in the wave whilst we're in the prone lying down position, by using our hands on the rails to steer and position ourselves in the critical part of the wave for the nose ride. The advantage here is we can be super specific and accurate about our position when we're in the prone position, which is much trickier when we're on our feet. We also decrease the time taken to get into the ideal position on the wave by doing this, which means we get more time in the pocket to capitalize on. For more information on this specifically, I ran through this in depth in the Sunday Glide 120, so feel free to check that out. Now, apart from assisting us to get our positioning right for the nose ride early, we can also plan our wave from the takeoff, even if the nose ride section isn't there. Some examples of this are, if you're reading the wave and making a judgment on what to do before you're standing up, we can decide to really get going and give ourselves an extra paddle and acceleration if we have to race down the line, if the wave appears like it's going to be really fast. Or we can also utilize something like a fade takeoff to pull ourselves into the pocket earlier, rather than having to do a pop-up and slow ourselves down back into the pocket, which can be a little inconvenient. This is something that sounds so simple, but does actually make a world of difference once we recognize and implement this into your surfing. So hopefully you can have a play around with this and have some success for yourselves. Now, the second lesson that I wanted to run through today is that less truly is more. If you're anything like myself early on, you might think that to do a better turn, we have to push harder. It's got to be bigger and we have to give it everything we have. But this just isn't true, and it's something that's taken me a long time to really come to terms with. Oftentimes, if we feel like we need to go harder, bigger, and push more rail with our turns, it can lead us to rely on being more forceful as a result, rather than being more particular and calculated. It's not necessarily the biggest, strongest people who are doing the best turns, and I think this is really telling. It's actually where the surfer is able to position their board for the turn, which determines how they're able to use the wave for power and acceleration. In this way, we understand that in order to do better turns, it's more about being calculated and measured in our approach. We compare this oftentimes to surfers in the intermediate stage, where attempting to progress in turns often leads to pushing harder in sections that don't call for it and getting lower in sections that won't allow the extension out of it. Where the progression will really come into play is not by pushing harder, but by putting your board in more critical sections, so we can use the vertical wave face and the natural power of the wave to generate our turns. This leads to better read and executed turns with more precision, power, and importantly, flow. Now, for lesson 3 today, and something that I do think is so important, is that as we're learning maneuvers, we need to master the fundamentals first before we add anything crazy. Now, this absolutely isn't to say that we need to eradicate style or dial down our expression on the wave, but I do stand by this, and for this reason. When I was a little grum, what I'd do is I'd watch videos and tapes of my favorite surfers, and then I'd try and go out in my next surf session to replicate the things that they'd done. The tricky thing here is that a lot of these surfers who are advanced, they're extremely proficient as surfers, and they add their own stylistic elements on top of this. And oftentimes, if we're trying to learn these maneuvers in this way before mastering the fundamentals first, we can run into a few troubles. Longboarding is a tricky one, as many of the best have such calm, casual styles, or on the other side of things, very eccentric styles, which don't replicate the fundamentals, and so when we may go to repeat and execute the maneuvers in the same way, we don't have the ideal conditions for our body positioning and technique put in place. So although it's not necessarily as fun or exciting in the start, nailing the fundamentals such as bringing the chest over the front knee for a great stable base, and also making sure that we can commit our weight onto the leading foot when we're doing things like cross-stepping, it's so important, not only for those maneuvers themselves, but laying a really good foundation and base which we can build off from. If our starting point is stiff legs, narrow stance, leaning backwards, it's going to be much more difficult to progress. But then, as we master the fundamentals, adding your own flavour, style in how you execute maneuvers and drawing inspiration from your favourite surfers is so good, and something which makes things fun and definitely worthwhile. But build a solid scaffolding first, from which we can then layer this on top of. And the fourth one today is simply being on the right equipment for the level of surfing that you're at. There are times when I was younger where I might not have been on the equipment which was best suited for myself at the stage of surfing that I was at, and I've experienced and also watched how being on the right equipment can have a profound influence on our surfing development. A couple of videos back on the Sunday Glide 142, I did go through some really good advice and helpful advice for all surfers with respect to what board you should be riding and when to know to progress your design and the board that you're surfing. The most important lesson is understanding how the wide point of the board has a significant influence over the stability of the board through different maneuvers and its suitability and influence on surfers at different stages in their surfing. So for a more in-depth video of that, feel free to check that video out. Alright guys, so thanks so much for watching today's video. I hope it was helpful and I hope you were able to get a little bit from it. If you do have any questions on today's video or any of the others, or even if you have any suggestions for what you'd like to see upcoming on the Sunday Glide, feel free to leave those down in the comments below. And I am headed off to El Salvador in 2 days' time, which is super exciting for the third stop of the World Longboard Tour. For anyone who does want to help support the channel, as well as myself getting over to all of these contests and raising some funds, there'll be some links down below in the description, so feel free to check those out. But other than that, we'll leave it there for today, guys. Hope you're all getting waves, and we'll chat to you soon.